I am very excited to film this video because I get to talk about some books that have been on my mind for a long time. I was originally going to make a video about my top favorite books from 2020 to 2025, but in creating a list of books for that video, I realized that a lot of those books have this overarching theme of the immigrant experience in the United States. So I thought that I would just do a book recommendation video of books that sort of have that theme. I think that a large part of the reason why I have really enjoyed these books in the past years is because I used to work in a setting where I worked closely with unaccompanied minors from Guatemala. So I was like really curious to learn more about, what it's like to come to the United States for more opportunity, like what is the journey like, what it's like being in the United States once you get here. So all of the books that I'm going to recommend are nonfiction, except for one kind of honorable mention that I thought that I would just throw into the video. And they all kind of document people's experiences from, the journey of coming to the United States to what it's like maybe being undocumented in the States, or what it's like being just like an immigrant in the United States and having to assimilate. The first book that I would like to recommend is Solito by Javier Zamora. Solito tells the story of Javier's journey as a 9-year-old boy migrating from El Salvador to the United States to reconnect with his parents. You see the sort of like dangers of the smugglers that Javier is working with, the desert crossings he has to go through, and just like the constant fear of being caught. I think it was really interesting reading this book because it's written in the perspective of Javier as a 9-year-old, and I think it really puts into perspective what it's like for a lot of young people who are coming to the United States to reconnect with their family or just to look for more opportunity that they don't necessarily have in their home countries, and also just like the unimaginable risks that come with making that perilous journey.
Hello, I feel like I didn't really explain myself well. I feel like Solito was really eye-opening for me because before this book, I had never really truly thought about what it's like to migrate across borders from South America to the United States. Especially as a child, we often hear about kids being detained at the border, or if you're like me, you see them working to send money back to their families in their home countries, but rarely do we really stop to consider like the journey itself. The fear, the exhaustion, the sheer willpower it takes to leave everything behind and make this treacherous trip to an unfamiliar place. Reading Solito really put that experience into perspective in a way that I had never encountered before. So whenever I think of unaccompanied minors at the border or working in our restaurants or hotels, that is what I think of. Children making this journey just for a chance to have more opportunity.
The next book is The Distance Between Us by Reina Grande, and this book chronicles Reina's life from when she was a child in Mexico, living in poverty, to when she moves to the United States, to LA, and lives as a undocumented immigrant in LA. This book was really interesting because it's divided into two sort of distinct parts. The first part being Reina's childhood, where she is left behind by her parents in Mexico because they are seeking more opportunity in the United States. And you see how Reina has to deal with this big feeling of abandonment and just like this huge emotional toll of not having parents at such a young age. And then in the second part of the book, you see how Reina moves to the United States and she has to assimilate into this culture and is dropped into this educational system where she knows no English, and her classmates don't have an understanding of what she has been through. She has to face the realities of the American dream and how this, promised land that she had dreamed of as a child isn't exactly so glamorous, and it's just not what everyone painted it to be. The next book is The Ungrateful Refugee by Dina Nayeri, and this book is a little bit different from the first two books because it is part memoir, part sort of journalistic accounts of other stories. So in this book, we see Dina's own refugee experience moving from Iran to the United States. Along with that, Dina also tells the stories of other refugees who are forced to leave their homelands. And this book is really interesting because it really challenges the idea of what refugees are supposed to be grateful for. And it really asks the question, shouldn't wanting a better life be enough? In this book, you see how the immigration system is just all types of messed up, and how there really isn't any justice or fairness in how people are granted asylum. And I think with that, this book really shows how refugees are just really stripped of their humanity in the process of seeking asylum. Overall, it was a very sobering and informative book. The next book I wanted to share is The Undocumented Americans by Carla Villavicencio. And this book is sort of similar to The Ungrateful Refugee in that it kind of is more of like a journalistic account of different stories. So in The Undocumented Americans, Carla gives voices to the undocumented immigrants who are sort of living in the shadows of America. And like The Ungrateful Refugee, this book really paints the humanity of these people.
Specifically, what I thought was also interesting about this book is that it took major historical events in the United States and gave voices to undocumented workers during those times. So, for example, some of the stories follow undocumented workers who worked after 9/11 to clean up debris in New York and kind of the long-term health complications that they have had from not getting the proper, PPE during that time. Some of the stories also follow undocumented Americans in Flint, Michigan, who were trying to get clean water and couldn't because they didn't have the proper documents. So in that way, I think this book had a sort of interesting perspective.
I really like one particular quote from this book, and I feel like it really summarized the message of the book well, and kind of like the message of all of these books. I personally subscribe to Dr. King's definition of an unjust law as being out of harmony with the moral law. And the higher moral law here is that people have a human right to move, to change location if they experience hunger, poverty, violence, or lack of opportunity, especially if that climate in their home countries is created by the United States, as is the case with most third world countries from which people migrate. The final book is Dear America, Notes of an Undocumented Citizen by Jose Antonio Vargas. For this book, I thought that I would actually just read the synopsis that was written by the author. This is not a book about the politics of immigration. This book, at its core, is not about immigration at all. This book is about homelessness, not in a traditional sense, but in the unsettled, unmoored, psychological state that undocumented immigrants like myself find ourselves in. This book is about lying and being forced to lie to get by, about passing as an American and as a contributing citizen, about families keeping them together and having to make new ones when you can't. This book is about constantly hiding from the government and, in the progress, hiding from ourselves. This book is about what it means to not have a home. After 25s of living illegally in a country that does not consider me one of its own, this book is the closest thing I have to freedom. In this book, Dear America, Notes of an Undocumented Citizen, we see Jose's personal journey of finding out about his undocumented status. So basically, in the beginning of this book, we see how Jose was put on a plane from the Philippines to the United States by his mom, and he doesn't have the right documents. And so he grows up in the United States just thinking he's like a normal kid. One day at school, he needs certain paperwork and he doesn't have it. And now he's kind of reeling from that discovery and the implications it has on the rest of his life. So those were all of the nonfiction book recommendations that I had for this topic. I also had one kind of honorable mention. It wasn't my favorite book per se because of the writing, but I thought that the story was interesting and kind of went along with the theme of this video. So the book is Behold the Dreamers, and this novel follows two families during the 2008 financial crisis. So one of the families is a Cameroonian family that is trying to build a new life in America, and the other family is this wealthy white family who is very involved in Wall Street. So just like the other books in this video, there is this sort of social commentary about sacrifice and the sort of fragility of the American dream. So if you prefer fiction books, maybe you can start off with this book and then like transition to some of the other nonfiction books that I had mentioned. So thank you for watching if you watched this far. If you have read any of these books, definitely let me know what you thought of them, or if you have any other book recommendations that are maybe kind of about this topic, definitely leave your comments down below. If you want, you can like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.